Gentlemen, before we step into what most never notice until it's too late, let's start by peeling back the quiet layers of emotional truth that shape every hidden shift in a woman's heart. Number 1. Her emotional energy starts to shift. Before a woman cheats, she doesn't start with her body. She starts with her mind. Her emotions are the first to wander. It begins quietly, almost invisibly. She doesn't wake up one morning and decide to betray. She slowly drifts away from the connection she once valued. The emotional rhythm that used to keep her anchored starts to break. She no longer responds with the same warmth. She no longer listens with the same interest. And the little things that once made her smile now barely get a reaction. You'll notice the difference not because she's distant, but because she's no longer invested. The laughter sounds hollow. The affection feels forced. And when you talk, her eyes don't hold the same spark. It's not about what she says anymore. It's about what she doesn't feel while saying it. In the early stages of that emotional shift, she'll appear distracted. She'll tell you she's tired, busy, overwhelmed, or just not feeling herself lately. But underneath those excuses, there's a subtle redirection of emotional energy. A woman can only pour her emotions into one connection at a time. When she starts withholding it from you, it means she's unconsciously giving it somewhere else, maybe to a fantasy, maybe to attention from someone new, or maybe just to the idea of freedom itself. It's emotional reallocation disguised as burnout. And most men miss it because they're too focused on the surface behavior instead of the emotional temperature beneath it. When a woman's emotional energy begins to drift, her priorities shift too. She stops nurturing what you both built together and starts nurturing what gives her emotional excitement again. It could be a new social circle, a coworker, a hobby, or even just a new sense of independence that makes her feel alive. The problem isn't that she's finding joy elsewhere. It's that she no longer feels responsible for feeding that joy back into the relationship. Her empathy starts drying up, her patience shortens, and her curiosity about your day fades into autopilot replies. She's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to feel again, and that search for feeling slowly erases what once connected her to you. This shift isn't loud. It's not dramatic or explosive. It's quiet, subtle, and disguised as normal changes. But if you look closely, it's written in her tone, in her pace of replies, in her body language when she's around you. Her hugs feel lighter, her conversations shorter, her presence colder. When a woman starts emotionally pulling away, she doesn't announce it. She just starts investing less of herself in every interaction. It's not that she's suddenly emotionless. She's just rerouting where her emotions belong. The warmth you used to feel was her being emotionally plugged in. And once that plug is removed, you'll sense an emotional blackout that no apology or reassurance can fix. Every woman's emotional energy carries intention. When she loves, she gives depth. When she's uncertain, she gives fragments. And when she's done, she gives silence. That silence doesn't always mean she's angry or upset. Sometimes it means she's already processing the exit quietly. She's emotionally preparing to detach so the physical act, if it ever comes, won't feel as heavy. Before she cheats, she desensitizes herself to guilt. She starts creating emotional distance so that when she crosses that line, it won't feel like betrayal. It will feel like closure. The tragedy is that most men never sense the emotional drift until it's too late. They assume her coldness is a phase, her lack of affection is stress, and her emotional distance is temporary. But by the time she's emotionally elsewhere, the connection has already collapsed. You can't rebuild something that one person has already mentally replaced. The relationship might still look intact from the outside, dinners, texts, routines, but emotionally, it's hollow. She's running the script of loyalty while her heart is rehearsing a new role somewhere else. She may even start testing your emotional awareness. She'll mention another man casually, just to see your reaction. She'll pull back affection to gauge whether you notice. She'll create small emotional gaps to check if you'll chase or stay indifferent. These are not random behaviors. They are part of the process where her emotional loyalty begins to shift. The dangerous part is that many men respond with either ignorance or irritation. They either fail to notice or they overreact, and both push her further into detachment. You see, before a woman cheats, she reassigns her emotions. The energy that once healed, cared, and connected now gets redirected into validation, fantasy, or escape. When she stops sharing her emotions with you, she doesn't stop feeling. She starts feeling elsewhere. Her heart begins to find new stimulation, something that gives her the emotional thrill that routine and comfort no longer provide. Emotional disconnection is not always a sign of hatred or boredom. It's a sign of emotional migration. She's emotionally relocating before she physically leaves. This shift can take weeks, months, or even years, depending on how strong the bond once was. But once it starts, it rarely reverses on its own. Because the emotional energy of a woman is like water. When it stops flowing toward you, it doesn't disappear. It finds a new direction. You'll notice it in her eyes, in her tone, in the way she reacts to your affection. The woman who once sought connection now avoids intimacy. The one who once leaned in now leans away. The one who once felt everything now feels nothing at all. The scariest part is how natural it all seems. You might convince yourself that it's just a rough patch, a busy schedule, or emotional fatigue. But deep down, you'll feel it. That silent, invisible gap between you and her heart. And no matter how much effort you put in, nothing feels the same because she's no longer emotionally feeding the connection. Her energy has shifted, her emotions have drifted, and her focus has silently moved to another emotional destination. Number 2. She redefines her independence. When a woman begins to emotionally separate before cheating, one of the most obvious signs is how she suddenly starts to redefine what independence means to her. It won't happen in a confrontation or an argument. It happens in subtle, graceful ways that look like self-improvement on the surface. She'll start saying she needs space, or that she wants to find herself again. She'll talk about personal growth or reconnecting with who she really is. These phrases sound healthy, and sometimes they truly are. But when they appear out of nowhere in a relationship that once felt close and intertwined, it's not just independence she's chasing. It's emotional permission to detach. The truth is, when a woman begins to redefine her independence, she's also rewriting the story of the relationship in her mind. She's reframing her role, reshaping how she sees herself, and quietly removing the emotional expectations she once accepted. The same woman who once loved being cared for, who used to rely on shared plans, now wants to do things alone. The routines that once symbolized connection, dinner together, shared decisions, checking in, now start to feel like control or suffocation to her. She starts craving solitude not because she's overwhelmed, but because she's preparing to live emotionally separate from you. In this stage, her language changes. She'll start using words like boundaries, balance, or me time. She begins to create emotional walls under the disguise of self-respect. She starts saying things like, "I just want to focus on myself for a while," or "I think I've lost touch with who I am." And while those sentences might sound innocent, they often mark the beginning of emotional withdrawal. She's building a narrative that justifies why she's no longer as emotionally involved. Independence becomes her moral shield, the reason she can disconnect without guilt. It's a psychological escape route dressed as personal evolution. You'll notice she starts making more decisions without you. She used to ask for your input. Now she doesn't. She starts making plans that exclude you, not because she wants to hurt you, but because she's practicing emotional freedom. It's a rehearsal for life without your involvement. She starts enjoying moments that don't require you, and the more she enjoys that feeling, the more she distances herself emotionally. The independence she's redefining is no longer shared strength. It's a form of quiet rebellion against the emotional bond you once had. This shift in independence often comes after she's already experienced disappointment or emotional stagnation in the relationship. When she no longer feels deeply connected, she starts to compensate by finding empowerment in autonomy. She begins to say things like, "I don't want to depend on anyone for my happiness." At first, it sounds mature, but underneath, it's her way of saying she no longer finds happiness in the bond that used to complete her. She's detaching by convincing herself that emotional dependence was the problem. What she doesn't realize is that she's not seeking independence, she's seeking emotional escape. You'll also see it in her social behavior. She becomes more active with her friends, spends longer hours outside, and talks about new interests or hobbies. The woman who once made the relationship her emotional priority now starts centering her world around herself again. It looks like confidence, but it's often distance. She's creating emotional breathing space, the kind that allows her to rationalize any decision that might break the bond later. The more she builds her sense of self away from you, the easier it becomes for her to emotionally justify walking away or even crossing a boundary she once respected. In many cases, she'll also begin subtly rewriting history. She'll downplay the happy memories, emphasize the hard times, and start telling herself that she lost herself in the relationship. That rewriting is a psychological defense. It allows her to detach without guilt. If she convinces herself that she was held back, controlled, or misunderstood, she can emotionally validate why she deserves something new, or someone new. It's the mind's way of making betrayal feel like liberation. Most men fail to see this shift because they only hear her words. They don't sense the emotional story being reconstructed beneath them. Her independence becomes her justification. She'll tell herself that she's not leaving you, she's just choosing herself. She's not being disloyal, she's being free. This self-liberation narrative is powerful because it gives her emotional permission to pursue validation elsewhere without feeling like she's betraying anyone. In her mind, she's already been neglected or misunderstood, so what she's doing now feels fair. And when she meets someone new who validates this newfound independence, she feels seen, understood, and alive again. That connection becomes the emotional escape route she was unknowingly building all along. At this stage, her body language changes too. She becomes more reserved, less open to physical closeness, more protective of her time and privacy. When you ask where she's been or who she's with, she doesn't argue. She simply dismisses it as insecurity or lack of trust. That's part of the redefinition. She's positioning herself as the independent one, and you as the one holding her back. The more she sees herself as liberated, the more she starts to see you as limiting. What used to be romantic consistency now feels to her like emotional confinement. This isn't about manipulation. It's emotional self-preservation. She's protecting her new identity, the one that doesn't rely on you for meaning. And once that identity is solidified in her mind, she's emotionally unreachable. You can't reason with her, you can't convince her, and you can't reconnect the way you used to. Because she's no longer trying to be ours, she's trying to be hers. The woman who once found power in partnership now finds power in detachment. She calls it evolution, but in reality, it's preparation. By the time she fully embraces this redefined independence, her emotional loyalty has already shifted. She no longer seeks comfort in your approval or reassurance in your love. Her decisions are now guided by self-interest disguised as self-care. She tells herself she's growing, but she's also quietly growing apart. That's the paradox. She's freeing herself from the emotional weight of the relationship while carrying the emotional justification that will allow her to cheat without feeling like a villain. This phase is rarely loud or dramatic. It's calm, logical, and often seems like maturity. But underneath that calm is a storm of emotional rationalization. The woman who says she needs to focus on herself is often the same woman emotionally preparing to replace you. Not because she's evil or cruel, but because she's convincing herself that she deserves more. Independence becomes her armor, her new identity, and her silent permission to detach completely from what once made her feel whole. Number 3. Her validation patterns change. When a woman begins the descent toward infidelity, one of the most revealing transformations isn't in her schedule, her habits, or even her affection. It's in her validation patterns. The kind of attention she seeks, the kind of approval she values, and the kind of energy she responds to all begin to change. Validation is the emotional currency of human connection. And when her emotional account starts running low within the relationship, she unconsciously begins seeking deposits elsewhere. It doesn't start with flirtation or physical attraction. It begins with subtle shifts, a new awareness of how she looks, how others perceive her, and how often she's being noticed. When she stops feeling admired, appreciated, or emotionally desired in her current dynamic, she starts chasing that feeling from the world around her. This change can appear harmless at first. She might start dressing differently. Not necessarily provocatively, but with more intentionality. There's a different kind of effort behind her appearance, one that doesn't feel like it's for you anymore. The woman who once dressed comfortably for your movie nights now takes longer getting ready to just run errands. The tone of her self-presentation evolves, and it's no longer about comfort or partnership. It's about attraction and affirmation. When validation becomes scarce at home, she begins to chase it externally, not always consciously, but emotionally. The mirror becomes her first audience, and social media becomes her second. Her online presence is often where this shift is easiest to see. She starts posting more often, not to share moments but to be seen in them. The captions become bolder, the poses more deliberate, and the interactions more playful. When a woman starts redefining her validation sources, she uses platforms as silent auditions for emotional attention. The likes, the compliments, the DMs. They all feed a need she's no longer fulfilling within the relationship. What's dangerous is that it rarely feels wrong to her. In her mind, it's just harmless attention, just appreciation. But underneath that harmlessness lies the beginning of emotional outsourcing. She's slowly letting external validation replace internal connection. When she's in this stage, her behavior around men subtly changes too. The attention she used to ignore now becomes significant. Compliments that once meant nothing now make her smile longer. She starts noticing who notices her. The same words that once rolled off her back now linger in her mind. This is the phase where emotional loyalty starts to shift quietly. It's not about infidelity yet. It's about emotional openness to the idea of it. She begins to crave the feeling of being wanted again, not necessarily the act of being unfaithful. But that craving opens emotional doors that used to stay closed. You'll also see it in how she communicates. The tone changes, not just with you, but with others. There's a new playfulness, a subtle, flirtatious energy that was never there before. She starts responding to compliments more warmly, engaging in conversations that stroke her ego, and allowing herself to be admired. When she laughs at messages from someone who clearly has an interest, it's not always about attraction. Sometimes it's about validation. She's feeding a part of herself that has gone hungry, and the more attention she receives, the more she justifies why it's okay. At this stage, the relationship starts to feel off balance. You might sense she's more invested in being admired than being connected. You might notice that her attention is divided, not just in time but in energy. The emotional intimacy between you weakens, and she replaces it with the thrill of being desired elsewhere. Her phone becomes more private, her conversations more guarded, and her interest in your compliments fades. Not because she doesn't appreciate them, but because they no longer carry weight. When someone else's validation feels new, yours starts feeling routine. What most men miss is the emotional psychology behind this shift. Validation is not about vanity. It's about emotional oxygen. When she no longer feels emotionally seen, she starts looking for eyes that see her differently. It's not always about cheating in the physical sense. It's about escaping emotional invisibility. When she gets attention from someone new, she doesn't just feel attractive. She feels alive again. That sense of newness becomes addictive. The attention becomes her emotional drug, and like any addiction, it requires more and more to feel the same high. You'll see the small signs first. She takes more selfies, spends longer on her phone, or becomes more protective of her online privacy. She might start reminiscing about how people used to notice her more, or how she misses feeling wanted. She might subtly test your reactions, mentioning another man's compliment, talking about how someone flirted with her just to see what you'll do. These aren't random remarks, they're validation tests. She's checking whether she still has that emotional power, whether she still matters, and whether you still care enough to react. As her validation patterns evolve, her perception of self shifts too. She begins to see herself less as a partner and more as an individual in demand. The approval of others starts shaping how she feels about herself. If the relationship once gave her emotional confidence, now she needs outside admiration to sustain it. This is why emotional detachment and validation hunger often go hand in hand. When she's emotionally disconnected from you, she becomes emotionally dependent on how others perceive her. And the more she indulges in that external feedback loop, the more distant she becomes from you emotionally. This phase can last a long time, sometimes indefinitely if the external validation keeps feeding her emotional needs. But once that attention becomes consistent, especially from a particular person, the danger intensifies. She begins to compare. Comparison is the silent killer of emotional loyalty. The new source of validation feels lighter, fresher, more exciting. It doesn't carry the weight of history or responsibility. It feels effortless, while the relationship feels heavy and predictable. This emotional contrast is what drives many women closer to crossing the line. It's not always about dissatisfaction with you. It's about addiction to the feeling that someone new reignites in her. The tragedy of this change is how invisible it can be. On the outside, everything may look fine. She's smiling, laughing, posting, living. But emotionally, she's no longer connected to the bond that once grounded her. The validation she now seeks is external proof that she still matters, still has power, still has value outside the relationship. And when that validation feels stronger than the comfort of stability, the emotional boundaries begin to blur. She stops seeing attention as danger and starts seeing it as therapy. And by the time she's emotionally dependent on that validation, the foundation of trust has already cracked beyond repair.